Hello and welcome back to the Motorsport Baithak podcast. I'm your host GD, and joining me today once again is my friend and your co-host Vedant. On this episode, we'll be talking about some F1 mid-season chatter. So let's grab some chai, take our seats, ready opinions, and dive right into the conversation. Hello Vedant, great to have you back here. What are your thoughts? It's been 2 weeks into the summer break, and I am going somewhat crazy for F1. Although, Formula E has kept us entertained, IndyCar has kept us entertained, and MotoGP has kept us entertained. We do have Lemma coming up, but I want F1 back now, right now.
Yeah, absolutely. The championship fight, and not just the championship fight, all the battles across the grid and all the storylines and everything. This season has been exceptional. This season has been by far the best season I have watched Formula One. And yeah, as you said, we want Formula One back as soon as possible. And more so, the next two races are Spa and Monza.
One of two of my most favorite circuits on the calendar, two of my most
Exactly.
favorite races on the calendar, and I just can't wait. Like I said, I just said, IndyCar has been awesome. Formula E just wrapped up today, and it was an exciting weekend overall. MotoGP had a crazy race this morning. We have Lamar coming up, but it's just hard to care about it sometimes, when you just want F1 back so much. With such a championship battle going on, and I have been saying this over and over again, this championship fight is going to go down in the history books. So let's talk about it, Lewis Hamilton leads Max Verstappen by 8 points after Vettel's disqualification was confirmed earlier last week. We'll talk about that later, but it's kind of surprising that Aston Martin, withdrew their withdrew their right to review or whatever that was. But yeah, and then Mercedes leading Red Bull by 12 points. Mercedes sitting on 303 points and Red Bull on 291. But if we really look at it, I still feel that overall Red Bull do have the upper hand going into the second half of the season, regardless of the damages, regardless of the fact that Mercedes are a little bit ahead of Red Bull. I feel Red Bull should feel confident in itself and its ability to take the fight to Mercedes and especially finish on a high towards the end of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you because Red Bull started very well. I mean, Max Verstappen was not leading the championship after the first few rounds, but they started relatively well. They were consistently fighting Mercedes. They were leading the championships for a long time during the first half of the season. Unfortunately, a couple of DNFs for Max and the race in Hungary that derailed his championship altogether. But as you said, Red Bull has a much stronger car overall, and I think the spending strategy that Red Bull has this season, uh, due to the cost cap, the regulations, and the 2022 regulations, I still think Red Bull is willing to spend a little bit more than Mercedes to get that extra bit of performance and win the championship.
I mean, Christian Horner did say, every championship is a championship, and you don't want to win one more or one less than the other. And which is why he
Exactly.
said, Red Bull will be going all out this season. And Mercedes may be talking, stuff, and throughout the season we've seen that anything and everything coming out of at least Toto Wolff and that Mercedes garage, you just can't trust that. You can't take that at face value. There's always something up going on.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna even pay any attention to what Toto Wolff has said so far this season. But Mercedes has definitely spent a lot of resources with the upgrades they have shown, going into Silverstone and Hungary. So definitely Mercedes is pursuing this championship just as much as Red Bull, if not more. But like you said, Max Verstappen had a great championship fight going on. He was leading the championship, and if it were not for the two DNFs and that one race in Hungary, he would be comfortably leading the championship going into the summer break, which goes to show, how well Max and Red Bull are doing on track, how well, how strong they are this season. And people have come out and said, that Lewis Hamilton is a lucky person. Um, I don't exactly agree with that. Lewis Hamilton does make his own luck. He's a hardworking person, and he's putting his foot down. He's back in the simulator and all things. He's doing everything that he needs to do that he would have done, as a rookie, as a new person in the sport. But he's putting in that extra effort in this championship fight. However, I feel that Max Verstappen has just been unluckier compared to Lewis Hamilton. We saw Lewis Hamilton crash out in Imola, but he was able to recover and still finish second off because of the red flag. We saw Lewis Hamilton had a wheel failure in Silverstone after his punt with Max Verstappen, which ended Max Verstappen's race. But because of the red flag, they were able to fix that issue, and Lewis Hamilton ended up winning that race. So he was able to get 50 points. And even though he threw away the race in Baku, he's still currently leading the championship after all the mistakes he's made throughout the course of the first half of the season. And we've also seen Mercedes make a lot of mistakes. The strategic call in Hungary, the wheel nut in Monaco with
Yeah.
Valtteri, and then little mistakes here and there. Which is not to say that Mercedes have not, made great calls like the call they made in Barcelona to go for a two-stop strategy, the call they made at Hungary with Lewis Hamilton again to go for a two-stop. So they've also recovered and they've taken the fight to Red Bull, but they've definitely made more mistakes than Red Bull have, which just goes to show that there might be a chink in their armor in this championship. Now, Lewis Hamilton has definitely come back stronger midway through the season, like we expected him to. He's definitely performed at a higher level than he started at during the beginning of the season, which just goes to show, everything is normal except the fact that Red Bull started the season stronger than they would have. And if everything remains equal, you would expect Red Bull to win the championship at the end of the season with Max Verstappen.
Yeah, see, I have not seen a more composed championship challenger in Formula One like Max Verstappen is right now. I mean, like in the past few seasons, Seb Vettel was challenging for the championship a couple of times, but he was a little restless. He was making mistakes himself, and all that media stuff and all those things were still happening. Max Verstappen is composed. Max Verstappen knows what he's doing. He doesn't speak much. Even the crash in the crash in Silverstone, he made an Instagram post, but after that he did not speak too much of that. And now I think he just said that aggressive driving approach will not, like, he won't use that approach any longer, right? He wants that championship more than Lewis Hamilton wants that championship, and I think Max Verstappen is going to go to great lengths to get that. He might not be as aggressive as he has been, like he just said, but I think Red Bull and Max Verstappen will do everything that it takes.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about the second drivers, Valtteri Bottas and Sergio Perez. Now Sergio Perez did show, did have a couple weekends back to back that were good, especially after I think it was Barcelona. He had a really good weekend in Baku, and then he did decent after that. But lately he hasn't been on pace with Max Verstappen or against Valtteri Bottas. Bottas had a terrible weekend once again in Hungary, but he's been off the pace the entire season. We saw flashes of pace from Perez, but Bottas has been, I feel, a little bit more inconsistent than Perez. But what is worse is the fact that both Valtteri Bottas and Sergio Perez are behind Lando Norris in the Drivers' Championship, and that is something they really need to give a hard look, because not only are they helping their teammates fight for the Drivers' Championship, not only are they in the fight for the Constructors' Championship, but they're also in the fight for their seats in Formula One come next season.
Absolutely, and I said it at the start of the season after testing and after Bahrain, that McLaren will eat away points from Mercedes and Red Bull, and Lando Norris is doing just that. I mean, no one expected that a McLaren would be third in the championship after halfway down the season. See, the first few races are okay, fine, but halfway down the season, the McLaren is third in the championship. It's just outrageous. And as you said, both Bottas and Perez are fighting for their seat as well as the championship and all that stuff. And neither of them are performing at the level that is expected of them. So I think the summer break, I mean, obviously both of them had a lot of bad luck and all that stuff, but the summer break, I hope they used it well, and I hope they.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Perez really struggle after the double header in Austria. He obviously got that penalty with after the incident with Charles Leclerc and things like that. But Silverstone was absolutely horrendous for Sergio Perez, And Valtteri Bottas had a really bad start of the season after crashing out in Imola and then having a really hard time in the rain thereafter, just wiping out half the grid. So obviously a lot to think about there. But since we've been talking about the seats, let's talk about some silly season for the top two teams in the championship. Let's talk about Mercedes first. That's the talk of the town thanks to George Russell scoring his first points in his last race in Hungary. But who do you see, taking that second seat besides Lewis Hamilton? Now, before we get into that conversation about silly season for any of the teams on the grid, what I want to put out there is what I think, what is my approach to the drivers that I want to see on the grid in Formula One. Now, for me, as a Formula One fan, I want to see those drivers on the grid that are like obviously who have been hyped up. They have a storyline coming into Formula One. There's a hype in them, and there's an the audience expects that driver to win a Formula One World Championship sometime in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like if there's not a storyline there, if like why are we not invested in Nicholas Latifi, who's also a young driver? He's doing well. He's scoring more points than George Russell. But why are we not invested in his storyline? Because we don't think as an audience he might have the skills. He might have the skills. Lance Stroll might have the skills to win a world championship. But why are we not as invested in them? Because we as a community don't feel the fact that they can possibly win a world championship or challenge for one. Which is why I think we need drivers that not only have the talent and the skill for the world championship, that are not just the best in the world, but also, they make the audience expect that out of them, and that is what is necessary. Like Fernando Alonso, I'm having a great time with Fernando on the grid. I was, dismissive of it at first, like I've said on the podcast multiple times, but over the last few races especially, it's been a joy to see Fernando. But do I think Fernando's going to be in a team or in a position where he's going to, fight for the championship? Most likely not. Looking at how things are going to pan out in the next couple of years. So would I rather see a youngster in that Alpine seat instead of Fernando even next season, even if Fernando has a 2-year contract? Absolutely. I'd rather see a Guan Yu Zhou, giving Esteban Ocon a run for his money than still watching Fernando Alonso over the next 3-4 years, regardless of how fun it is, just because of that storyline and that expectancy that we have from a Formula One driver. And if you want, the 20 best drivers in the world, you also need to have a grid from which you expect 20 world champions and not just 2 world champions and 18 other drivers competing for points and making it a good season, right? Which is why I feel like, especially in the Hamilton-George Russell debate, people have been saying that, Toto Wolff wouldn't want a George Russell to be in that second seat because, George will want to give Hamilton a run for his money and he won't play the team game. But is that really the driving decision or the question that you answer to get a second driver in the seat? Are you telling me that Toto Wolff does not have the confidence in Lewis Hamilton to say that, hey, Lewis can manage any situation, and even if it blows up, Lewis will come out on top and he will be the number one driver and the world champion, even if I put George Russell in that second seat? Is that what Toto Wolff was saying? So those are some things that I want, our listeners and the audience to think about before jumping to the conclusion that, this is the number one reason why George Russell won't get that seat. Because, that might not be the driving factor in making the decision behind, giving a driver that second seat at Mercedes or at Red Bull.
Man, you make an excellent point. And I think I absolutely agree with you. The rationale behind driver selection should not be what the politics may play, what money they might bring in, right? The rationale behind it should be that you give you can perform to the fullest, and you can only perform to the fullest when you have the best drivers. Now, obviously, it is a unanimous decision, and unanimous opinion rather, that George Russell is a better driver at the moment than Valtteri Bottas. And I think that is, as you said, that is the only reason why Toto Wolff should go for George Russell rather than Valtteri Bottas. And I mean,
yeah, and like I said, why are we not invested in Valtteri Bottas winning the world championship? It's because we don't really expect that much out of Valtteri Bottas after having seen him for 4 seasons in that Mercedes seat. We don't really think that Valtteri can take it to Lewis anymore, which is why we want something more, more exciting. We want to see a George Russell in that seat because we expect him to take it to Lewis for the world championship. And there will be fallout, but is that do you want a Formula One grid where it is decided based on a team, or do you want a Formula One grid where it is based on merit? because we've talked about people coming in with money, we've talked about people coming in with other sorts of connections and things and this and that and the other. So why not just go based on merit? Give meritocracy a shot and see what happens, and get your favorite drivers into the seats to see them win the championship.
Absolutely. And I mean, see, there might be a multi 2-1 incident at Mercedes when George Russell joins, right? But at the end of the day, George Russell's performance, as we expect, would be greater than Valtteri Bottas, and he would not be losing to a McLaren, which is essentially the fifth fastest car on every single weekend, right? And I mean, yeah, that's the whole point of it.
Absolutely. So well, all that nice talk aside, and all that nice, theories aside, what do you think really is going to happen at the end of the season? Is George Russell going to be in that seat, or are we going to see someone else? Or is Bottas going to sign again with Mercedes?
Well, now you just made me sad because I just want George Russell, but as you said, realistically speaking, right, it's anyone's guess. It's anyone's guess because Toto Wolff is not giving away any clues. Neither are George and Valtteri. So yeah, it's
Well,
anyone's guess.
some people might disagree with you after that pre-race interview that George Russell gave, on
Yeah.
during the Hungary weekend.
Yeah.
But I think it's high time Toto Wolff takes up George Russell. He's definitely losing points with Valtteri Bottas right now, and yes, we can argue that Valtteri might make a comeback next season and so on and so forth. But personally, I don't think not any of us are invested in Valtteri's future in Formula One as much as we're interested in George Russell's. And let's let's move one forward rather than tie someone up in a weird position and then as the community bash him and then things like that. So it's not like we were really positive towards Valtteri. We definitely want to see him do well, but do we expect that of him? Honestly, most people would say most likely not. So let's just be honest and let's just get the conversation going. But enough about Valtteri Bottas. Let's talk about someone who's in a similar position right now. Sergio Perez didn't have a seat at the end of last year. Got snapped up by Red Bull. Got a breather. But then there was a huge if. If you perform well enough, we'll keep you in the seat. Do you think Sergio Perez has justified so far that he deserves a seat at Red Bull?
Well, so far, given his performance, I think he has justified it because, see, the Red Bull car we know is quite tricky. He's obviously performing relatively better than Pierre Gasly and Alexander Albon, right? And I think given their choices, I mean, Sergio Perez's performance is right there, and he might get that seat solely based on his performance. But given their choices itself, Red Bull don't have any other choice. I mean, they do not want Pierre Gasly. They have the choice, but they do not want Pierre Gasly. And I don't think Alexander Albon or any other driver will come back to the Red Bull second seat.
Yeah, that is a good point that you made because even if Red Bull was looking at Pierre Gasly, I just don't think Pierre Gasly has been consistent enough in a car that has been pretty good this season on pace. I just don't think he's been consistent enough to bring home enough points, to make a claim for the second Red Bull seat. And although Sergio Perez hasn't been too consistent either, especially after the first 6 races, he had a good sixth race after Barcelona. He had a good race in Baku. He picked up the points like Red Bull would expect him to. And then what was the race after Baku? He had a good 2 weekends in Austria, more or less, right? But struggled really badly in Silverstone and didn't have a great race in Hungary either. So I think there's definitely work to do, but again, he might just be able to save his seat because there isn't anyone else challenging for that seat either. Yuki Tsunoda is not up to pace in that AlphaTauri. Pierre Gasly is not consistent enough. Liam Lawson is doing okay in F2 and DTM, but I don't think he's done enough to make a claim to that Red Bull or AlphaTauri seat. Dennis Hogga has been on fire in F3, but I don't see Red Bull taking a driver from F3 and putting him straight into Formula One anymore. Dennis Hogga will make that graduation to F2 next year,
Yeah,
but
definitely.
I really don't see him going to F1 straight away. And who are the other Red Bull drivers even there? Alex Albon is definitely not coming back. He's had an okay start to his GTM season, but nothing to rave about. Although Sergio Perez has come out and talked about the fact that Alex Albon has been instrumental in his success in F1. So I feel that Alex Sergio partnership in Red Bull behind the scenes will carry on, but I don't see Alex Albon coming back to the front lines in F1 anytime soon,
Yeah,
especially in that Red Bull fold.
I think I agree with you because I read somewhere that Alex Albon is looking for an IndyCar seat next season, and if
He was at the IMSGP this weekend
yeah, exactly,
with
exactly.
with Christian Lungard making his debut making a rather spectacular debut in IndyCar, qualifying P4, and Alex Albon was there, and I think there was another F2 driver there with the two of them.
Exactly. So I think Alex Albon. See, if Albon were to come back to Formula One, I think AlphaTauri is the only place he can come back to. In which case, Yuki Tsunoda will have to step out. Right. That is the only scenario that I can think of, which just leaves Red Bull with Sergio Perez, and I think that is how it's going to be.
Yeah, and it's super weird. You look back 2 years ago, and you were like, the Red Bull family had way too many people to give a seat to, and now they have absolutely no one. However, I'll throw in a wrench here, and just talk about stuff that the chances of happening are really low, but we do have people coming out of Formula E now.
Yeah.
We just talked about it.
That's
Two
true.
teams have given up. So you have Lucas Di Grassi who's free. You have and Red Bull do have their other drivers. Da Costa and all of those guys won. And then although Nick De Vries and Stoffel Vandoorne are Mercedes drivers, I don't think they'll say no to an F1 seat if Red Bull were to offer them one.
Absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
There's a lot of options out there.
And see, while we are throwing, random guesses, if George Russell joins Mercedes, Valtteri Bottas is free. So
Yeah, but I don't think Valtteri Bottas has the beans to be in a Red Bull seat, given how Mercedes operates and the way because Valtteri Bottas hasn't exactly made the most of the Mercedes environment, and we know that the Red Bull environment is
way
in
tougher,
comparison
right?
from what we
Yeah.
have heard, way tougher, way worse for a driver going to that second seat with Max Verstappen. So I don't think Valtteri Bottas will want to make a move from a number two driver to another number two driver in a worse position.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, as I said, Sergio Perez and Red Bull is the only option, right?
Absolutely. So I do think Sergio Perez will keep his second seat at Red Bull at the end of the season. And personally, I think George Russell should get that seat at Mercedes, regardless of all the reasons that he shouldn't, which don't really make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
But let's talk about P3 in the championship, Ferrari versus McLaren. Now I'm going to come out and say something that I have thought about the entire first half of the season, but obviously we have acknowledged the fact that Daniel Ricciardo has underperformed. But time and again we've come out and said that Ferrari and McLaren are on pace. But if you look at the points spread between Ferrari and McLaren, at Ferrari, Charles and Carlos have the same number of points basically. Charles has 80 points, Carlos has 83 points. Yes, Charles has had a bit of bad luck, on the track, but you look at Lando and then you look at Daniel Ricciardo. Lando has 108 points, and then Daniel Ricciardo has, I think, 40 odd points in the championship, which just goes to show that if Daniel Ricciardo were to get up to speed, McLaren could pull out a healthy lead on Ferrari at any given point, because that McLaren is definitely a stronger race car on a Sunday, even if it is not qualifying P4 or P5, with Charles Leclerc or Carlos Sainz behind the wheel of the Ferrari. The Ferrari does drop some places on a Sunday, and Lando Norris does capitalize. So it just goes to show that if Daniel Ricciardo were to just step up a little bit more, I'm not saying he has to be on Lando's level, but just a little bit more, and McLaren will be able to consolidate that P3 position pretty easily in their case. However, Ferrari are bringing in an engine upgrade to the second half of the season, so it'll be interesting to see how that affects their performance over the course of the second half of the season, especially with power-hungry tracks like Monaco, Spa, and other circuits like Abu Dhabi, where qualifying performance will matter a whole lot more. So that dynamic might play out across the second half of the season, but I think McLaren have definitely left some points on the table with Daniel Ricciardo in that second seat.
Well, that is true, but while we are talking about this, I just had a thought that had Daniel Ricciardo been performing at a level that the McLaren is capable of, I think Sergio Perez and Valtteri Bottas would have been dropping a lot more points.
That is true.
And that would have made the championship, the Constructors' Championship itself, a lot more exciting. But yeah, that's another story, like another parallel timeline. But as you said, you are correct. McLaren and Daniel Ricciardo are leaving a lot of points for Red Bull, for Ferrari to take away, and I think Daniel Ricciardo knows what he has to do, the braking performance, and how the brakes works in the McLaren are the biggest issue right now for him. So I think that they know what they have to do, they know what they have to improve, so they have set goals, and I think they can achieve them.
Now, my question is, obviously Ricardo has come out and talked about what his struggles are with the car, and then we have also heard from who's the team, not Zach Brown.
Andrew Seidel.
Andrew Seidel, yeah, we've heard from Andrew Seidel about the same issues, and both of them have talked about the similar things. But I think on F1.com there was an article a couple of days ago where Fernando Alonso talked about the changes Alpine has made on the car to better suit his driving style. So I wonder if McLaren are taking a similar step, or if they're expecting a little bit too much out of Daniel Ricciardo at the moment and not adapting the car as much to him, which is like a weird conversation, and you and I can't really put a finger on that. But we haven't really heard any news from Daniel Ricciardo or McLaren saying that they're trying to adapt the car to Daniel Ricciardo's driving style. Now, why we haven't heard about that, or why hasn't that been a part of the conversation, is the question in itself. But that might be something that McLaren might want to look at in order to consolidate that P3 position in the championship.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, because we saw Esteban Ocon's performance turn around overnight with that chassis change. And if it was something related, like as you said, if they were to make some changes to suit Daniel Ricciardo better, and if that were to bring out performance, I think that would be the clear-cut way to it. So obviously there might be some other things behind that, but yeah, it's definitely worth exploring for us as fans, and as like guessing what could happen.
I guess, but I don't see Daniel Ricciardo going anywhere. Zach Brown absolutely loves Daniel Ricciardo. We did, in Drive to Survive, we did come to know that Zach Brown had initially approached Daniel Ricciardo when he was leaving Red Bull to join McLaren, but it didn't come to fruition until 2 years later. So obviously, after having signed a 2-year deal, Daniel Ricciardo will be at McLaren. We know next year, and I don't see any threat to his performance per se. But another question that came out, during the mid-season, especially on Twitter, was the fact that if it really takes Daniel Ricciardo a whole year to adapt to a new car, what is going to happen in 2022? When there's an absolutely new car and everybody's trying to adapt. And the very fact that if Daniel Ricciardo can't perform at the car's best, is McLaren really betting on the right person to help them win a championship or contend for a championship in the future?
Well, see, it's like the situation where Fernando Alonso signed that McLaren contract with Honda, right? There was prospect, there were high hopes, and it didn't come to fruition. So obviously there will be improvement, there will be changes and all that stuff, but I think the fact that everyone will be starting at zero in 2022 will make life for Daniel Ricciardo a lot better than it is right now.
Yeah, but again, long term, can Daniel Ricciardo adapt faster than the other drivers in the grid? Because this year we haven't seen that happen. But next year, and even in Renault, he took a whole year to adapt, and we know that he didn't have a great year with Nico Hülkenberg in the other seat. So that's the question out there. Is there for the audience to answer, to think about. But yeah, moving on to Ferrari a little more. Carlos Sainz, he has impressed. He's leading the he's leading Charles Leclerc. Who would have thought that would happen? I had my money on Charles Leclerc, not obliterating Carlos Sainz, but doing much better than Carlos. Obviously, like I've said before, Charles has had a bit of bad luck. We saw that in Hungary, and Charles has made a couple of mistakes, but nothing like he has been making. Like, Charles has definitely made a lot lesser mistakes than he used to.
Yeah.
In the last couple of, in the last season with Ferrari, especially with Sebastian there, we saw, we had seen Charles, literally drive into his teammate on multiple occasions, trying to be aggressive on the first lap, especially. But Charles has definitely, put the brakes on that, and he's been a lot more responsible in that car. But at the end of the day, 11 races into the season, he's not leading his teammate. He's 3 points behind his teammate, which just goes to show the work that Carlos Sainz has put in that Ferrari and how well he's doing, and why this is probably the best team for a future world championship if Ferrari are to win one over in the new regulation era starting in 2022.
Yeah, definitely. See, Carlos Sainz and his work ethic is unmatched, right? Because I remember when he signed for McLaren, he bought a place in Woking or somewhere around McLaren's factory, so that he could be at the factory like more often than any other driver on the grid. And same thing with Ferrari. I think he moved to Italy in December itself, once his obligations with McLaren were
McLaren were
over.
over.
Exactly. So I think his work ethic, and we saw this in the first 4 races of the season. He adapted to that new car faster than anybody else changing seats. So
And that
I,
Ferrari is also notorious, and we know that. Seb Vettel, who had been at Ferrari for so long, struggled last year, and we're of the opinion that Carlos is gonna really struggle in that car probably. Although we did know that Carlos adapted well in that McLaren, even in his first season there. And Carlos has driven in multiple different cars, and has put in great performances. Whether that was at Renault when he moved from Toro Rosso,
Yeah.
or when he went to that McLaren. But even then, we were skeptical about him getting into that Ferrari and being able to compete at Charles's level. But man, he's just been scintillating in that car, and I've thoroughly enjoyed myself watching him race in that Scarlet car. And it just bodes well for Ferrari. And another thing for Ferrari, obviously, a lot of questions were raised when Mattia Binotto took over as team principal, and Ferrari's performance dipped. They had that engine scandal in 2019, and their performance dipped a whole lot in 2020, and a lot of questions were raised to Mattia Binotto. But Mattia Binotto has gone on and shown that he might just be the man for the job, especially with Ferrari's resurgence in this 2021 season. So, what are your thoughts on Mattia Binotto's leadership as a team principal and the direction that he's taking Ferrari? And what do you think is going to happen? What are your expectations from Ferrari going into the next half of the season and beyond?
well, see, I honestly think the way they bounced back from a disastrous 2020 just goes to show that they are capable of greater things in a way. Obviously, that engine scandal was unnecessary, and I mean, it was a scandal. So we don't talk much about that. But I think the progression they are making right now, even after that disastrous race in France, they quickly learned whatever they wanted to change and performed better ever since, right? So yeah, I think it's going to be upward trajectory. Obviously, once again, with everything, next season is a reset essentially. So it's going to be interesting what every team does. But in terms of leadership, as you asked, I think Binotto, I think Ferrari finally have the stability that they needed, because that they did not have that in the past few seasons, and I think that's going to show results in the coming few seasons.
Absolutely, and Mattia Binotto did admit the fact that they've had to develop a lot longer than they've initially intended to, especially after that race in France. And then I think Charles Leclerc also talked about the fact that Ferrari doesn't completely understand what happened with the tires, and they'll continue to work towards understanding them more and more throughout the course of the season to make sure they stay in the fight for P3. But again, especially all right. Yeah, this is the question that I was thinking about for the last couple of minutes, but I kind of forgot. So Charles and Carlos are on the top of their game in Ferrari. Where does that live? Where does that leave Mick Schumacher in and his future and the possibility of him being at Ferrari in the next couple of years. Because if Carlos continues to perform at the level he is, there is absolutely no reason for Ferrari to look at Mick Schumacher and replace Carlos or Charles. Charles obviously has a long-term contract until I think 2024 with Ferrari, but Carlos, his contract obviously ends at the end of 2022. I just don't see any reason for Ferrari to replace a driver like Carlos if he continues to perform at this level for the next however many years. That they're at the top, that he's at the top of his game.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think Carlos Sainz should be
And
replaced.
they're both young drivers. Charles is like what 23, 20 something like that, and Carlos is 26.
Yeah, and see, talking about Mick Schumacher this season, if we want to evaluate him, his benchmark is his teammate, which is not the perfect benchmark in itself, and then he is in Haas, which is a disaster. So I don't think we can evaluate him properly this season. Hopefully next season Haas can have a better car. They can.
Let's talk about Mick Schumacher later on, right, and about Haas. But I'm just talking about from a Carlos Sainz point of view and Ferrari point of view. Like, even if Mick Schumacher was performing on a level like George Russell is, right? Is that enough reason for Ferrari to replace Carlos Sainz or Charles Leclerc with Mick Schumacher, given the way they have been performing at Ferrari? Yes or no?
Oh no, definitely no.
That was the question. Absolutely, and that is what I feel too. We'll talk about Haas and Mick Schumacher eventually. We'll go down the order. But obviously, let's talk about Alpine, Aston Martin, and AlphaTauri. Let's talk about Alpine first. Obviously, going into the weekend in Hungary, we said Alpine looked like the best team to take that P5 position in the Constructors' Championship. Obviously, Fernando Alonso is doing really well. After the first few races, he's come back. He's had that P4 finish was really good. And he's had really good finishes in, I think, Baku and Silverstone. Esteban Ocon turned it around after his chassis change, got his first ever win, and he's been in the points ever since. Where do you see Alpine, finishing up? Because obviously they're not going to bring enough upgrades. I don't feel they can bring enough upgrades, compete with McLaren and Ferrari for that P3 position, but they could bring enough upgrades or do well enough to pull away from the Aston Martin and AlphaTauri fight. Where do you see Esteban Ocon and Fernando Alonso in this fight, and what do you expect from them for the second half of the season?
See, the race in Hungary with the P1 and P4 was huge for Alpine, right? And in terms of championship, they now have a 9-point lead on AlphaTauri, which means, these teams only get 4 or 5 points every race, even in their best weekends, right? So
Yeah,
I think
on an average, they can't score.
Yeah, on
they
an
can't
average,
score
exactly.
more than they won't be scoring higher than a P7 or a P6 at most.
exactly. So yeah, exactly. So I think Alpine is in the driver's seat for that P5 in the championship. I think any unfortunate events like a DNF or stuff like that might hinder that. But surprise victories like Hungary might hinder that.
Absolutely.
But yeah, as of now, I think they will back that P5.
Yeah, and I don't think there's much to say. Alpine has done a great job this year, and they've put as many points as they could on the board. And they haven't. I don't think Alpine has left any points on the table, unlike AlphaTauri and Aston Martin. Now let's talk about Aston Martin really quickly. I don't think there's anything else to talk about at Alpine. We know Fernando's going to be there next year, and for all we know, the way he's performing, he'll be there for a couple of years after too. For all we know, especially and it just seems like age doesn't matter anymore. Kimi Räikkönen is 40. Fernando just turned 40. Hilo Castroneves is returning to IndyCar full time next year, and he's 46.
Yeah.
Valentino Rossi is, I think, 39, and he's moving to Sports Car Championship next year, most likely, quitting MotoGP. So there's no reason for Fernando Alonso to quit, and the way he's driving, there is absolutely no reason for him to be replaced at Alpine. Even though I stand by what I said earlier regarding having world championship contenders in F1 and not having Fernando Alonso and having a youngster in that seat instead, like maybe gone to Joe or Christian Lundgaard. But that's a different conversation, especially since there's no room for anyone at Alpine currently, and all the question marks that even Esteban Ocon had around him after the 2-3 races in the middle of the first half of
First
the
half,
season.
yeah.
All those questions have gone away. But yeah, let's come to Aston Martin. I still don't understand why Aston Martin withdrew their protest against the stewards' decision after the stewards had acknowledged the fact that there was new evidence and that a review was mandated. A review could be done regarding this decision and the disqualification that they had issued for Sebastian Vettel's P2 at Hungary.
Yeah, I don't know, man. See, Aston Martin have been a disaster this season, honestly. After last season, we had so high hopes from them because as Racing Point, they performed brilliantly. And with Aston Martin, that brand name and that investment coming in, I think everyone had hopes from them. I mean, no one expected them to be P3 right away, but still fight for that P3 with McLaren and Ferrari like they did last season, right? I think they have disappointed everyone, especially themselves. I don't know why they withdrew that appeal. Obviously they sought extra evidence and maybe that revealed something or whatever. But even if they would have gotten those 18 points, I think they would have been only 56. They would have only had 56 points, which is still 12 points less than AlphaTauri. So even with that P2, they are so far behind. And I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was Fernando or someone who was talking about performance. He was talking about Alpine's performance, but extending his analysis, Aston Martin and Alpine have definitely dropped a lot of performance on McLaren compared to last year. All those three teams were on pace last year, but this year Aston and Alpine have definitely dropped down. But Aston has definitely made that excuse that the rule change did not favor them, and that is why they have dropped performance. Whereas Alpine hasn't had that excuse. But all in all, we've seen Mercedes make a performance. We've seen Mercedes, be back on top in Hungary and at Silverstone on pace. So if Aston Martin wants to make that excuse even now, I don't think that excuse stands anymore. And what they did last year was unsportsmanlike. So I think it's just karma hitting them back where it should have. So if Otmar wants to complain about it, I'm not paying any attention to that. However, let's talk about Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll. Now Seb has definitely seemed a lot more comfortable in that Aston Martin after the first couple of races. Definitely he had a couple P15 finishes, I think, and a couple P13 finishes in the first 4 races of the season. But ever since then, he's looked really comfortable, and it seems like he's performing at a higher level than he did in 2020 in that Ferrari. And it bodes well. And Seb has just seemed to be enjoying himself. He's been doing a lot of social work. He's been really busy off track, and it just seems he's happier in general. And that is also showing in his performances on track.
Yeah, definitely. I think, as we talked about it earlier, right? This is a rejuvenated Sebastian Vettel. This is I don't want to say it, but Seb Vettel, like Valtteri Bottas does it, right? Valtteri Bottas 3.0. So this is Seb Vettel N.0 or whatever. But yeah, definitely a way better driver than Ferrari last season. More at peace with himself, I suppose, and more at peace with what he's doing, both on and off the track. So that, Lance Stroll has had his difficulties and his fair share of incidents, but Sebastian Vettel.
But Lance Stroll does not seem to be performing at the level he was last year. He definitely had a low point in the season, and then he couldn't really recover from that. He had a few really good races, but this season Lance Stroll has just seemed a little below average, in my opinion. And then he had that incident in Hungary, and that was not exciting either. That did not help him, especially in wet conditions where he often performs really well. So that was kind of surprising. And the only news that the only positive news, I guess, that was Jax Villeneuve, I think, came out and said that Lance Stroll might be replacing Valtteri Bottas in that Mercedes, and that created some waves on Twitter. But
Yeah.
I was pretty quick to dismiss that, and I think we had a conversation with CY Motorsport over Twitter about the same and how that Toto Wolff was going to handle all that situation. Again, seems unlikely that Lance is going anywhere. His dad obviously wants to win the world championship, and I don't think he wouldn't want to win it with his son. And it'd be kind of weird if he said, "Oh, we at Aston Martin want to win the championship," and then he tries to send his son to Mercedes so that he can win the championship. Does not it just won't it just won't make any sense. But yeah, Lance Stroll has just doesn't look like. Obviously, he had a bad shunt in Baku, which kind of shook him. He had a tire failure just like Max Verstappen. We kind of forget that sometimes, but thankfully he's done well after that. But again, he needs to put that car in the points way more regularly than he has been in the first half of the season.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, uh, Lance Stroll, as you said, we know the level he can perform at. And I think similar to last season when he had that shunt in, I think Mugello, where that shook him to his core.
I think that was Silverstone where or Mugello, you're probably right.
Yeah, I think it was Mugello. I may be wrong, but I think it's the same thing that happened this season, right? That shunt in Baku was pretty severe, and I think it might have derailed his thought process and all that stuff. But we are a few races down the line from Baku, so that should have not been the case in like going into Hungary and all. But yeah, let's just see what
Absolutely, definitely
improvements
leaving
can be.
some points on the table, especially with drawing that protest, leaving 18 points on the table for Lewis Hamilton and Carlos Sainz to pick up. But let's talk about AlphaTauri now. Now they were someone who we were really impressed with during preseason testing. We were like, AlphaTauri might just be on pace with Ferrari and McLaren, and may give them a run for P3 in the constructors championship, but they struggled to even make it to P5 this season consistently. And Pierre Gasly has put in some scintillating, qualifying performances, but in the race, he's either been unlucky, he's either been hit. Charles Leclerc hit him, I think, a couple times in the race, but he's had his bad weekends too, and he's just not been consistent enough to put points on the board. Yuki Tsunoda, a lot of hype when he came into F1, did pretty decently in the first couple of races, but then just had disasters one after the other, crashed out the car during qualifying, during free practice multiple times, and he's just not been on pace. However, he has definitely recovered and he's put some points on board for AlphaTauri over the last couple of races, so that does bode well. But what will AlphaTauri need to do in order to really put the foot down for the P5 in the championship?
See, I think they can. I mean, like it is with all these teams, they need consistent weekends. I think AlphaTauri has tried using alternate strategies a few times. It has not paid off very well. I mean, they did a two stopper once, which did not pay at all, and they have been trying to go longer on the first stint and reap benefits from that, which has not.
Yeah, they've been trying to pull an Aston Martin ever since Aston Martin started
Yeah,
going long on their first stints and getting those points in, I think, Monaco and the race after that. But that only works with Sebastian Vettel. Not
yeah,
everyone can pull that off.
exactly. So I think, as I said, for these three teams, Aston, Alpine, and see, Alpine is a little ahead of them, but Aston and Alpha need consistent weekends, and
Especially the fact that Alpha has the pace to challenge.
absolutely, and I mean, Yuki Tsunoda knows, and see, Yuki Tsunoda every weekend he says that I need to, you know, improve my approach and I need to do this and that, but we do not see that happening. So I really wish that happens, and Yuki Tsunoda has shown promise, and I think that promise can be achieved uh, during the second half of the season. But yeah, Pierre Gasly and AlphaTauri. I mean, AlphaTauri have made a few strategy mistakes, as I said earlier as well. So it's all these things, consistency across all the factors, strategy, the car, the drivers, and everything.
Yeah, and talking about still season now for AlphaTauri, where do you see Yuki Tsunoda and Pierre Gasly in 2022? Now, I feel that Pierre Gasly will be at AlphaTauri, even though there's I don't like we've talked about this before. We don't see a future for Pierre Gasly at Red Bull. We don't see him going back to the Red Bull A team. But I think France DOS will really want to retain Pierre Gasly, especially for the 2022 season, because it's a new car and they will need a driver they can rely on for the development of that new car throughout the course of the next season. So I think Pierre Gasly will be essential in that seat. However, Yuki Tsunoda is a big question mark because Honda is obviously, leaving F1. They won't be with Red Bull. So is there enough reason for Red Bull to keep investing in Yuki Tsunoda, or is it time for Red Bull to, switch things up again? Maybe get Alex Albon back, which is even more unlikely in my opinion, or maybe give Liam Lawson a chance, who's been doing okay in both the championships. He's got 58 points in F2, and I think he's sitting 21 points behind the championship leader in DTM. I think he has got 80 points after 4 races, whereas Kevin Van der Linde has 101 points. So nothing like too exceptional, but he's put in some good performances, and he's made a case for the fact that he he is on the way to a seat in F1 per se. If Dennis Hogger doesn't light up the world on fire next year, maybe, or something like that.
Yeah, see, I mean, Dennis Hogger might not get that seat, given the fact he might not have enough super license points. But I think that seat, Yuki Tsunoda, is not guaranteed for next season or whenever his contract ends, because, as you said, Liam Lawson is right on that.
Obviously, the hype train is not there behind Liam Lawson like it was with Yuki Tsunoda. But is there enough reason to for Red Bull to give Liam Lawson a shot compared to Yuki Tsunoda, who's doing okay in that AlphaTauri seat? But again, new season, new car, and Yuki is definitely integrating himself into the team. He's moved to Italy and he's invested himself to a whole lot more, regardless of who made him do that. But he's definitely putting in the effort. So does that count, or does Yuki need to prove a point over the next 12 races to Red Bull to convince them to let him stay at AlphaTauri?
See, I think Yuki can do it. I think he can. I mean, he's improving, and I think he can make that point to stay at AlphaTauri. But if Liam Lawson can get those super license points, I won't be surprised if AlphaTauri promote Liam Lawson and demote Yuki Tsunoda, because Yuki Tsunoda has not been what he promised, right? In a way.
Yeah, exactly. And the way I would frame it is the fact that the drivers at Red Bull are supposed to be future world champions, right? They're supposed to come into AlphaTauri and prove themselves that, hey, they can perform at the highest level. Now, if you're not doing that over the course of the season, especially what we saw with Albon and Pierre Gasly, there is no reason for you to be in that seat. So, Red Bull might as well give someone else a chance to prove themselves that they can be, the next world champion. And that is what that AlphaTauri seat is for. You get a year in AlphaTauri, maybe less, and if you do well, you get promoted to Red Bull. But if you don't, because technically AlphaTauri are not looking to do well in the championship. They're looking to groom Red Bull world champions. So is Yuki Tsunoda on that path? Because I think previously we heard from a lot of ex-Red Bull program drivers that Red Bull doesn't really invest in you, and you are the one who has to give the performances. They're not really gonna help you get there. They're just relying on the numbers that you produce. But obviously AlphaTauri has invested in Yuki Tsunoda's development. France DOS has been really involved with it, and he's helped Yuki Tsunoda a lot. So is that something? Does that go and say that okay, Red Bull are actually looking for a future with Yuki Tsunoda as a second driver, even maybe in the future in the Red Bull seat?
Well, that's a tricky one, but honestly, I don't see Yuki Tsunoda being a strong contender for that second seat Red Bull anytime soon, right? But talking about ex-Red Bull program drivers, I mean, we have seen world-class drivers like Jean-Eric Vergne, Sebastian Buemi, and I think Da Costa was at Red Bull as well. They
Not
lost
get a
out
seat.
exactly because they could not perform at Toro Rosso back then, and Daniel Kvyat performed at Toro Rosso and was promoted to Red Bull, even though he could not perform at Red Bull itself. But that's another thing. So I think Yuki Tsunoda has a lot of work to do over the course of the half season, and I won't be surprised if he is dropped and someone like Liam Lawson or Yuri Vips is picked up if they get enough super license points.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about the last three teams. I think this is the most interesting conversation we're going to have throughout the day today. Let's talk about Williams first. Definitely scored their first points. They look on an upward trajectory. It seems that the team is working well together under Josh Capito. Josh Capito has come out and said he's been in support of George Russell. He wants George Russell, to obviously be at Williams and help them, contend for whatever they can next year. And it seems like they're going to do well next year. It's looking pretty good after the performance of both Nicholas Latifi and more of George Russell have put in over the last few races, especially with George Russell's qualifying performances and nearly missing out on points on multiple occasions before finally getting 10 points at Hungary. With Nicholas Latifi and George Russell. So they've definitely consolidated, in my opinion, the P8 finish in this year's Constructors' Championship. But I don't think they need to do a lot more. But I think the silly season talk is really on for Williams. Now we said before that we think George Russell will go to Mercedes. Now, regardless of whether he goes or not, is Nicholas Latifi you think going to stay at Williams? Do you think Williams are going to want to retain him, or do you think Williams are going to want to go for two new drivers? There's been chatter about Nico Hülkenberg being a possibility, Alex Albon being a possibility, Guan Yu Zhou being a possibility, but obviously these are all rumors, and we've heard absolutely nothing from the Williams garage, especially since George Russell's decision has not been made by Mercedes yet.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be interesting, and I think in my honest opinion, Williams has two empty seats for next season because they have said that they do not rely on paid drivers anymore. That means Nicholas Latifi is not guaranteed for next season. Now, in terms of Nicholas Latifi's performance, he has been good, no doubt about that, but he has not been the level that Williams might want to retain him and give away the chance to bring in Nico Hülkenberg for that matter. So I think Nicholas Latifi is not guaranteed a place next season. I think Nico Hülkenberg is not guaranteed a place next season in Williams. I don't think he can come back in Formula 1 as a full-time driver. But I think someone like Guan Yu Zhou or someone from the Formula 2 roster can come up to Williams. We have Jack Aitken. He has enough super license points. He performed well in Bahrain last season. And I think, I remember Alpine saying that we won't shy away from approaching other teams to run our drivers, right? And I think Williams is the perfect place to do that. And that brings us to the point of Guan Yu Zhou and potentially Oscar Piastri. So
yes, Oscar Piastri has definitely done well. He's currently leading the F2 Championship with 108.5 points ahead of Guan Yu Zhou, who's sitting on 103. So they'll make a killer combo if they do come into F1. However, their lack of experience will definitely play a part in getting up to speed. But you brought up an interesting point about Nicholas Latifi and his performance. He's been good, especially his race pace has been pretty on point. Compared to George Russell, he's not that much slower compared to George Russell on race day. However, his qualifying performance have been pretty disappointing since he's not been able to make it out of Q1 on I think more than one occasion, if that. But what is interesting is we've never heard about the role that Nicholas Latifi plays in the development of that Williams car. We've all obviously heard that George Russell has obviously been there for 3 years. So we know that he must be an integral part of the development. But it'll be interesting to hear from Josh Capito or one of the engineers at the team how integral or how beneficial or what kind of feedback does Nicholas Latifi provide? How much is his feedback integrated into the team, and how important and what kind of a driver is he in that sense of uh, in, in those roles of helping the team develop the car throughout the season, and so on. So maybe if he's good enough for that, he might be the driver, especially if George Russell moves on to Mercedes. Williams might want to retain him from a development point of view, if he does well for the team. But that is something that I am unaware about. I'm not aware about. So it'll be interesting to see if that is something that helps him retain his Williams seat for 2022.
Yeah, see, the thing is, as you said earlier in the podcast, we want to see potential world champions in Formula One, even if it is for the last team on the grid. And I think Nicholas Latifi is not that, because I mean, he spent a lot of time in junior formula, and he had to resort to sponsorship to get that Williams seat at the end of the day. And I mean, if that's the case, you are not typically world champion material, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
so yeah, I
But yeah,
next.
now let's talk about Alfa Romeo. Again, I feel like there are two seats at Alfa. I think they're not going to finish any better than P9 this year, unless there's another freak race like Hungary, which is quite possible considering how the season is going. But all things considered, it is unlikely that Alfa will be able to do any better, especially since they didn't capitalize in Hungary. So obviously there is some, there are some internal struggles with strategy at Alfa. There are some internal struggles with, Kimi's performance on during qualifying. And even though Giovinazzi has stepped up somewhat, it doesn't seem it's good enough for for him to be able to be in contention to score points every race. He's definitely had a few P11, P12s, but just not there to pick up the points at P10. But I mean, there's not much to talk about Alpha in terms of the performance and things like that. Obviously, they've had struggled. It seemed that they were doing well, during preseason testing, but throughout the course of the year, it seems that Williams has better pace, especially with George Russell behind the wheel, compared to Kimi Raikkonen or Antonio Giovinazzi in the Alfa Romeo. Do you see Kimi Raikkonen and Giovinazzi in that seat next season? I don't. I think both of them will be replaced. Who will they be replaced by? That's a great question. But I just don't see Giovinazzi and Kimi in that seat next year at all.
I mean, I kind of agree with you, because I don't think Kimi. See, I mean, we remember Kimi Raikkonen said that it is his hobby. Formula One is his hobby, and that's why he is still doing it at Alfa Romeo for 2 seasons. But I mean, listening to his frustrations over the radio and all that stuff, I don't think he's super keen to continue that now as well.
But
I
even
mean,
like Sauber and Alfa Romeo, they might not be keen enough because his performance is really not there per se.
yeah,
He struggled with qualification. His race pace is there, but it's just not good enough. I'd say, or just not enough for them to give him another year in F1.
exactly. I totally agree with you. And the second thing, the second driver, Antonio Giovinazzi. Now, while he has given a few good performances in terms of qualifying, I think he was in Q3 in Monaco. But as you said, over the course of the season, he has improved, but not quite much. But I still
And you
think
got to remember that he's been in Formula One for multiple years now, and he hasn't made a big enough step to say, okay, he's considerably better than what he was when he came into F1.
yeah. But see, I mean, the reason Antonio Giovinazzi is in Formula One right now is because he's Italian. And I'm not going to shy away from that, because Ferrari and Alfa Romeo both wanted an Italian driver on the grid, and that's why this happened. Now, I think Alfa Romeo, having signed another contract for next season with Sauber, still want an Italian driver on the grid. And if they want that, Antonio Giovinazzi is the best option. But if they have better ambitions, and if they want the new era of Formula One, I mean, if they want to define that new era of Formula One better, I think they'll go with two other drivers. But that's just brings us to the fact that there are too many seats at Williams, at including AlphaTauri, and Alfa Romeo.
Yeah.
But
But so like
too
I
few
think you make a
drivers.
good point about I think you make a good point about Antonio Giovinazzi and Alfa Romeo and Sauber and why they would want like an Italian driver in that seat. But what about that second seat? I don't see Kimi there. You don't see Kimi there. So what is the possibility? Like who could be there? Now, obviously, fans have come out and said, "Oh, Mick should move to Alfa Romeo. He shouldn't stay at Haas." But I think there is good reason for Mick to stay at Haas, which we'll come on to later. But who else do you see in that Alfa Romeo seat? Alfa Romeo does have a junior driver, I believe. I don't remember the name, but I think they have a junior driver in F2 right now. Uh,
Theo Poche.
yes, Theo Poche. So he's there, but do you think he's going to make the jump next year? And also the fact, again, teams are going to a new rule and regulation, and they will want someone with a little bit of experience in F1 to help them with development. Now, Antonio Giovinazzi is good with development, and we know that for a fact because he was a Ferrari development driver before becoming an F1 driver with Alfa Romeo. So he's got the beans to help a team develop their car. But I don't think Kimi will be as essential to Alfa Romeo going to next year. But who do you think is a possibility at Alfa Romeo? Just to throw out a couple of names out there.
Yeah, I think Theo Poche as a prospective new driver, obviously, provided he gets enough super license points, is a prospective driver. But we have had rumors about Valtteri Bottas moving to Alfa Romeo if he loses that seat at Mercedes. And I think that is a good combination. And not the best combination, but I think it's good for both the teams because Alfa Romeo obviously have ambition and want to close that gap to the midfield teams. And Valtteri Bottas would, if he is to go down to a lower order team.
Valtteri Bottas can't even perform in the midfield in the Mercedes.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying anything. I know he's an F1 driver and he's on a different level as an athlete and as a person. But we've seen him struggle. So is he really the option that Alfa Romeo would want to consider? I doubt it.
Yeah, well, I don't know, but as I said, if all these seats are open, there are too many seats and too fewer new drivers, which brings us to people like Nico Hülkenberg and Alex Albon Daniel Kvyat, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's talk about Haas. Now, obviously, Haas, nothing to talk about. They're going to finish P10 in the championship unless Mick pulls a blinder on another freak race. Couldn't pull enough of a blinder. He did race well at Hungary, but couldn't pull enough of a blinder. However, if you talk about so Haas, I feel like Haas also is paying enough in damages, but all the damage is caused by their own drivers. Mick has had a few shunts, which goes to show that he's not really comfortable in that car. Nikita Mazepin has had a few shunts, so obviously they're losing money too. But I think there's hope for Haas going into 2022, and I'll tell you why. I think early in the season, before when the rules kicked in for when the budget cap rules kicked in earlier this season, I think there was a transfer of talent. Like people were transferred from Ferrari to Haas, and I think that might bode well for the 2022 development. And I think that is the reason Mick Schumacher should stay at Haas for next season, because the Ferrari people have gone on to Haas. They might just do well enough to take the competition to a team like Alfa Romeo or AlphaTauri and put him in the midfield for some competition and give him some real F1 wheel-to-wheel racing experience.
Yeah, that is true. And given the fact that if they finish last, they will have the most number of wind tunnel time. Most
money, most wind tunnel time, most resources in general to be able to invest in development of the car.
Exactly. And they have, we can have hope for them next season, but given the fact that they already have a smaller budget and they are using it to repair the cars too often, so I think it's going to be quite tricky. I think Gene Haas, we talked about it earlier. Gene Haas looked like he wanted an exit, but I think right now Haas are a little bit more stable. Obviously, they'll pursue sponsorship money and all that stuff during the end of the season, but I don't think they can jump a lot above. They can obviously fight for P8 and 9 next season, but that's about it.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. But with the Ferrari engine upgrade, we might, and Ferrari's bringing a new engine to 2022, so that might give them a boost too in terms of performance. Because Ferrari's lack of performance, has been a factor in Haas not doing as well, especially when Kevin and Roman were in that team. So that'll be something to look forward to too. But I think that's all for talking about teams and stuff. I still have a few questions regarding the rest of the season. All right. So, what are your thoughts on who needs to pay for the damage caused by these collisions? Now, at the start of the year, if you remember, when the budget cap was agreed to, the team principals came out and said, it's you almost can't account for who needs to pay for it because all these incidents are racing incidents, and you can't really and there's not enough loss to really compensate for it or for there to be a need for extra budget to be allocated or any rules and regulations that another team should pay another team in case of damage. But now there are team principals who are coming out and saying that we might need to look into this for the future seasons. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the race did a brilliant video on this topic, and I think, I mean, I don't remember how they concluded it, but I think what my opinion is that at the start of the season, team principals knew that there would be incidents and there would be need to allocate budget from the cost cap to repairs and stuff. Obviously, no one expected the amount to run into multiple millions, but I think if you have a good contingency plan and if you had thought about it, this should not have been an issue in my opinion. But then again, when we see incidents like Hungary, it was not an racing incident. It was just plain simple, brakes, or it was just ugly. And it's those incidents which no one wants to pay, right? Because if it's a racing incident, it's 50-50 both ways. In incidents like Hungary, it's only the fault of the driver who crashed into you. So, yeah, it's a tricky one, but I still think the teams should pay it themselves from their budget. But yeah, it's
I think the rules also call for that that if you end up spending more, there's obviously allowances for it, but you have to give up some resources. There's a penalty for spending more money than the allocated budget. So obviously Formula One accounted for that, and the teams accounted for that. But again, in my opinion, they made the decision early last year, and I'm okay with the cost cap and teams having to pay, for their damages. Obviously, the repercussions can be, championship altering. We already know that Max Verstappen will be taking penalties very early on into the second half of the season because of the damages he has experienced because of Silverstone and Hungary, and then some Charles Leclerc also got his car damaged, and he might be moving on to his second or third PU components, and then similarly for other drivers throughout the grid. So that is something to look into. The way things should be penalized. Maybe the drivers should not be penalized anymore for such incidents, and you might want to change rules regarding that. Maybe it'll just be like a team penalty of some sort. But again, that's a good conversation for the team principals in the paddock. Now, the last one that I wanted to bring up during our mid-season chat, Vedant. Now, obviously, we're going to Zandvoort this season. New track, new place. People aren't really expecting a lot of great racing there because it's a narrow track and the way it has been set up. However, I have a question coming out of Zandvoort. Now, if Zandvoort is successful, there's also a question that, F1 cars need to run on a banking. I think it's like an 18-degree banking from what I've learned. Now, does that... Now, obviously, this question is not... it's not an important question regarding the F1 season in itself, but the question is, if F1 is able to successfully run at Zandvoort with the cars that they run at every other track, does that give us a window of opportunity or give the F1 community a window of opportunity to push for a oval track race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, to go back to that historic race and have a one-off race there? Now you might say, why would F1 race on a banking? for the same reasons. F1 race still races at Monaco. It's a one-off track. You know, you don't. It doesn't affect the season a whole lot, but it still gives us a show and it gives us something to celebrate. So does will that give us a window of opportunity to push F1 to maybe arranging a race, making it a calendar, making it a feature in the calendar at IMS. Formula One is already moving to two races
The
in the
United
US,
States.
and Austin is definitely it's a great location. It provides great racing, but it is a little bit out of the way considering most of the racing, especially or the race fans, are located in and around Indy or Florida or the Carolinas. And I feel coming back to the IMS will be a huge it'll be a great thing for all racing fans in the United States of America, especially those who are so much invested in it and who live around the Carolinas and the Indianapolis region.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point because after the 2005 USGP, I don't think anyone expected Formula One to go back to bankings, right? With Zandvoort coming in, I think it's a great opportunity to see how the tires perform now. Obviously, the tire manufacturer is different and everything, all those things. But I could guess where you were going with that thought. The only issue is I don't think Formula One will go back to an oval. They might consider the road course because it's a road course and it's just one banking. The only one corner is banked, but I think that is a realistic proposal. The oval itself is I don't think Formula One wants to do that.
Maybe even Daytona. Do like the IMSA or the WEC course where you go through I think it's like three bankings, three turns, and then it's like a road course for the rest of it.
Yeah, but I think the banking at Daytona is too high. I think
that
Indy is still more realistic.
Yeah, and we do have IndyCars running there, so it's possible.
Yeah.
Just something for the fans to talk about. Maybe even push the F1 community. I would love to see F1 cars hit 250 miles an hour around an oval, just like I saw the IndyCars earlier this year, but faster. But yeah, that's really all from my side. Without anything else from you about this mid-season chatter.
Well, no, I mean, as we have already said it so many times, this has been a brilliant season so far, and it is bound to be a brilliant one for the remainder of the season, right? Obviously, we hope that the championship goes down to the wire, and as you mentioned earlier, those points from the sprint races might affect the championship, so that would be very interesting. But yeah, I mean, if I had to make one prediction as such for the remainder of the season, I would say that Lando Norris would retain the P3 in the championship, and that would really affect Valtteri Bottas and Sergio Perez's reputation.
That is a prediction I can definitely get behind. But that was a great closing thought, Vedant, from you, and this was a great conversation. And we went over an hour for the first time ever, I think. But didn't seem that long, and I would love to talk more. But it's time to wrap up. So thank you so much for joining me once again. And another 2 weeks, and F1 will be back. Don't forget to watch Le Mans next weekend, 24 hours of Le Mans, and the first time you will see hypercars racing against each other in a 24-hour race. So lot more racing to look forward to. Thank you once again, and we'll catch you on the next one.